April from April's Home, and today I'm here with a really fun grocery haul. This is a project that I've wanted to do for quite some time now. I really love studying about the Oregon Trail. I'm from Oregon, we live here in Oregon, and growing up we were always studying in school about the Oregon Trail. We have museums here really close. We live really close to the end of the Oregon Trail, which is Oregon City, Oregon. Live really close to that, and it's just been something that's been a part of my life since I was a little girl. I was a huge fan of Little House on the Prairie, and that whole pioneer life was just always really fascinating to me. One of my grandmas was also really into pioneer life as well. With her 4-H group, they would go on a recreation trip every year where they actually traveled along part of the Oregon Trail. I never got to do that with her, my sister did, but I loved hearing about that and seeing what they did and their prairie dresses and things like that. It was just always so much fun. And another thing I've always been fascinated in was the food that they brought with them on their trip. Since I enjoy keeping my pantry and learning about food storage and things like that, it has always interested me what the pioneers brought on their journey. We know that before they started out on their trip, they had to pack up their wagon with food and provisions to last them for their whole trip. And that is just a really interesting topic to me. So I have been reading and studying what the pioneers brought with them on the Oregon Trail, on their Oregon Trail journey. So I did a little grocery haul with some of the items that are as similar as I could find to what they brought with them on the Oregon Trail. Of course, this small amount of food here is nothing compared to the amount of food they would have brought with them. A family of 4 would have probably brought around 1,000 pounds, possibly a little bit more than 1,000 pounds worth of food with them on their journey. In fact, the majority of their wagon was food storage. So this is, of course, really small compared to that, but there are a few items like this cornmeal here that I found recently when I was out grocery shopping. I came across a 25-pound bag of cornmeal, which my store doesn't normally sell, but they happen to have this in stock. This would be about the amount that one person would have on the trail. Some of the numbers that I found when I was reading about this, the first book that I looked into is called The Prairie Traveler. This is the 1859 Handbook for Westbound Pioneers by Randolph Marcy. It's a really interesting book, a historical accounting of what the pioneers brought, some advice for them, things like this. This is one of the actual books that pioneers would have read before undertaking their journey on the Oregon Trail. It had some advice in it from back in that 1859 time frame in the mid 1800s when they were traveling along the Oregon Trail. This book had some information, and I also looked on different websites from different historical information sites, and the food kind of varied from here to there about what amounts that they would choose. I found different figures for things like bacon. Bacon was one of the main meats that they brought with them on their journey. They would actually pack it in bran to keep the fat from melting if it was hot outside. So some figures said they brought 25 pounds per person, all the way up to 100 pounds per person. So I'm thinking it was somewhere in between. Sugar, they brought about 25 pounds per person. The coffee figures that I found seemed pretty low to me. They said that they would only bring 15 pounds per person for their journey, and mind you, back in the pioneer time, even children drank the coffee because it would disguise the water flavor, which sometimes didn't taste very good. Of course, their water sources were just varied along the way where they could find water. And so everybody was drinking coffee every morning. I don't know, but we go through a lot of coffee around here. So I don't know, 15 pounds seems like a small amount to me, even per person. So maybe it was a little bit more, maybe it was less, maybe it was varied by each family. Some of the amounts given were in bushels, and I couldn't quite figure out what a bushel was, of say dried fruit, for example. But either way, it was really fun to think about, and we'll tally up how many pounds of food is here on this table, and we'll see how much of this, how close it gets to the 1,000 pound mark for a family of 4. I'm sure it's just a small fraction of the 1,000 pounds, but I thought it would be super fun to look at some of the staples that were brought on the Oregon Trail.
Okay, so here is a close-up look at my Oregon Trail inspired grocery haul. So again, this is the book that I have been reading to kind of study a little bit more about the Oregon Trail journey and some of the information that they would have read back when they were actually traveling on the Oregon Trail. So that's a close-up look at that book there. Some of the items I have put in these fun little bags here just to kind of make it look a little bit more rustic. We'll open up each bag and find out what item is inside. So like I said, the meat that they brought was bacon. And bacon didn't just mean standard bacon like this. It meant any type of sliced type of pork type product that I believe that had been cured. So they did bring a lot of bacon. So I got a few items of bacon to go ahead and stock up on for this the next couple of months here. Got this big 3-pound pack of bacon end pieces. And just a side note, I picked up most of these groceries from Winco, and I ordered some of the items from Azure Standard. I will go ahead and leave a link in the description box below with my personal link for Azure Standard if you're interested in checking that out. Winco is a wonderful store that we have here in Oregon that sells a lot of bulk goods. So that is where I went to pick out some of the bulk items as well. And that is also where I found this bacon. So 3 pounds of bacon ends and pieces. Thought that would be really fun to be able to cook up in a lot of different recipes. Then I got some of this bacon here, some maple flavored, and then some cherry wood bacon. And then this bacon here, this is pork belly, big thick pieces of bacon. I'm going to go ahead and cut this up and use this in some of my fun recipes, including some bean recipes coming up here that I hope to share with you. And the next item that I have here is salt. So salt was a really important item, of course. I thought this Celtic sea salt would be a fun one to add to my pantry. It is a light gray variety. I imagine that the salt they had back then a little bit more closely resembled a sea salt like this, but I'm not 100% sure. But this is a nice big 5-pound bag of salt. They would have definitely had more than this, but that's a good amount. And then to go along with salt, they did have pepper as well. So I got here a 4-ounce little pack of pepper to add to my pantry. So salt and pepper, of course, that would be used for cooking, all sorts of things. And along with cooking, they had an item that they brought with them called saleratus. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. That was what they used in place of baking soda. Baking soda had not been, I don't believe packaged baking soda had been invented yet. So they used an item, again, called saleratus, and it was sort of like a in between a baking soda and a baking powder. It is what they used as a leavening agent when baking their bread on the trail. So I picked up a big 4-pound box of baking soda. This is something that is still a really wonderful thing to use today and to have in your pantry. I use baking soda all the time. And then to go along with our baking soda, I got a 10-pound bag of all-purpose flour. So this 10-pound bag is just a small representative amount. A family of 4 would have had 600 pounds of flour on their wagon. Flour was a very important item. That's what they used to bake their bread with. And then the sugar category. They did bring a lot of sugar with them. They would use sugar in their baking, of course. So I bought a few kinds of sugar here. I got some pure cane sugar and some sucanant. And then also these cones of brown sugar. Here, I got a couple of these. These smell absolutely delicious. I'm really excited to use these. How they had their sugar was not in bags like this. They would have their sugar, and that's why I bought these cones. They would have their sugar in cones, big cones of white sugar that they would grate off or break off a piece to use. Their sugar was also probably not white. It was probably a little more brown, like the sucanant here. But they did have a lighter version in the cones as well. So somewhere between these 3 sugars is probably a lot what their sugar looked like, bigger cones of sugar. And they definitely brought sugar with on the journey. So that's the sugar that I bought. And then, of course, coffee and tea. This only represents a small amount of tea that they would have brought with them. This is very light. This is only 1.41 ounces. They brought multiple pounds of tea with them. This is a nice black tea, my favorite. If you follow my grocery hauls, you'll know that I always buy Twinings Irish Breakfast Tea. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to stock up on a couple more boxes. And then also coffee. They brought a lot of coffee, as I said. The amounts that I found were varied as to how much per person of coffee was brought. They didn't bring it in the ground version. I believe they brought it as coffee beans, which were roasted and ground every day or probably every couple of days to make their coffee. But I just bought a big old-fashioned can of MJB ground coffee. Haven't had this kind of coffee for a very long time. Not since I was young have I even seen MJB coffee. So thought that was a fun can. I've also recently been trying some of the 1850 Folgers blend coffee, which has been pretty good as well. And it's probably a little more similar to the taste of coffee that they would have had back then on the trail. And also it's probably varied based on how they personally roasted their coffee beans and how they ground them up and how they brewed it over the fire. So coffee and tea. Then the next item that I found was dried fruit. I got a couple of varieties. Apparently they had a lot of dried fruit on the trail. So I picked up a pound of dried yellow peaches from Azure Standard. I've never had dried peaches before. I'm really tempted to try making a pie out of these or something like that, trying to use them in a way that they might have been used on the Oregon Trail. But peaches were one of the dried fruits that they did bring on the trail. Then I have a big bag here. This was something I was excited to find at Winco. A big bag here of dried apples. I was eating some of these when we first brought them home. They're delicious. I can't wait to incorporate these in some of my baking and get these in a nice container in my pantry. And then also, while I was out shopping for some of these ingredients, I stopped in at Hobby Lobby and I found this really cute wagon. I'm going to use this as a decoration in my pantry room. I just thought it would look really cute and be a nice reminder of how the pioneers stocked up their food on the trail. So that's a little something that I found at Hobby Lobby. I just thought that was really fun. And another fun item that isn't anything that they would have had on the Oregon Trail, I bought some wagon wheel inspired pasta here, some Oregon Trail inspired pasta. So I just thought that would be fun to make a yummy casserole with maybe some wagon wheel macaroni and cheese. So I picked that up while I was shopping for all these bulk goods. I was just having a wagon train and wagon wheels on my mind. Another item that they would have had is vinegar and molasses. It didn't ever include amounts for those items, but those items are items that I have read that they did have on the trail. They would often have a dairy cow with them on their trip, so they did make their own butter and they had access to milk if they had a dairy cow. They also sometimes brought lard with them. I haven't cooked with lard very frequently, but I know this makes wonderful pies, so I thought that I would use some lard and make an old-fashioned pie with this lard and maybe some of these dried fruits here. Also, along the trail, they were able to hunt, and one of the things they hunted, of course, were buffalo. So I picked up from Azure Standard a delicious buffalo strip loin steak that me and my husband will share in a meal coming up. Perhaps we'll cook it up with some beans on the side in a pioneer fashion. I actually really love cooking with ground bison. I love putting that in my chili. It's one of my favorite meats that I often buy just in my everyday grocery. But I thought it would be important to have some buffalo along with this grocery haul here, because that is definitely a meat that they ate on the Oregon Trail. Next up here, we have some dried beans. So these are a navy bean, and this is one of the basic types of beans that they would have had on the Oregon Trail. They ate a lot of beans. I'm sure they brought far more than this, probably hundreds of pounds of beans. So I picked up some beans that I will cook, definitely using a little bit of that molasses. That's always delicious in beans. And then another major item that was purchased for the Oregon Trail journey was cornmeal. And like I said, I found a 25-pound bag at my store. I actually found it after I had picked up some cornmeal from the bulk section. So I have this bag of cornmeal here, as well as an additional 25 pounds. Luckily, I love cornmeal. I love cooking with it. I love making cornmeal mush, as well as fried cornmeal mush. That's definitely a video I would love to make coming up soon. How I make my fried cornmeal mush. It's delicious. They ate this as bread. They ate this as porridge. All sorts of uses for cornmeal. So that is definitely a major staple on the Oregon Trail, cornmeal. And this one was a little surprising to me, white rice. I didn't think that they ate much white rice on the Oregon Trail, but they did. It was included in the list of supplies that they often ate, rice. So I have here a 25-pound bag of long grain white rice. And that is probably close to what one person would have taken. These 2 bags are about what one person would have taken in cornmeal and rice. So one person's worth here of rice and cornmeal. And then I picked up a box of saltines. They did not have saltines on the Oregon Trail, but what they did have was a very hard cracker called hardtack or pilot bread. Now, my Winco used to carry pilot bread, and up until about 4 years ago, I used to still buy pilot bread at the Winco in the bulk food section, and I loved it, actually. It's a really sturdy, thick cracker. Again, it's not something that you would just eat without dunking it in your soup first. So hardtack is a recipe that I'm really interested in learning how to make myself, so that is on my list of projects to do sometime soon coming up. Make my own hardtack and even maybe package it up like they did back in the Oregon Trail. I was at a Civil War reenactment one time, and one of the vendors there actually was selling hardtack, and it was wrapped up just like it would have been back then. It was really neat to see, and ever since I saw that, I've always wanted to make my own. But in the meantime, I put saltines here as something slightly similar to a cracker. Of course, these are much softer and nice and fresh and delicious, and wouldn't last nearly as long as hardtack. But I put this as a place marker for hardtack because they definitely brought along plenty of hardtack with them on their journey. And then the last item I picked up, I found this at Hobby Lobby. It's old-fashioned lemon drops. And I don't know if they brought any sort of candy on the Oregon Trail. But I think if I was a mom back in the olden days getting ready for the Oregon Trail and I had children, I think that while I was at the general store, I probably would have picked up a couple of old-fashioned candies to tuck away in my supplies to give to my children as a treat. I don't know if any of them thought that way back then. This was a pretty hard journey that people took. It was a very serious thing. But I thought it was a fun thing to pick up some old-fashioned lemon drops. I don't even know if they had invented lemon drops yet back then, but I do know that they had some fun old-fashioned hard candy back in the general stores back in those days. So I did include a little bit of candy in my haul here, because I think there have to be some mothers out there that would have probably tucked away a few sweet treats for the Oregon Trail. They're definitely light enough to carry and tuck in with all their supplies. I don't know how accurate that is historically, but I certainly thought it would be fun. So those are all of the items that I picked out for my Oregon Trail inspired grocery haul.
So that was my Oregon Trail inspired grocery haul. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at that. I had a lot of fun with this project. I do hope to do some other fun themed grocery hauls in the future. I hope it gave you some fun ideas of things you might want to store in your pantry. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.